a poor farm boy became the world's longest-serving elected leader by winning 5 straight elections over 24 years. And now at 79 years old, he just announced he's running for a 6th term while handing his country's entire budget control to his own son. Ralph Gonsalves entered this world on August 8, 1946, in Culinary, a tiny farming village where everyone knew everyone and nobody had much money. His father Alban worked in the fields growing crops and ran a small business on the side, while his mother Teresa operated her own little shop, both of them working sunrise to sunset just to keep food on the table and clothes on their children's backs. The Gonsalves family wasn't like most people in St. Vincent and the Grenadines because they didn't come from Africa as slaves, and they weren't British colonizers either. Back in 1845, Ralph's ancestors left Madeira, a Portuguese island near Morocco, and traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to the Caribbean as indentured servants, which meant they agreed to work for years and years under harsh conditions just to pay for their boat trip to the Caribbean, living somewhere between slavery and freedom, treated badly but not quite enslaved. Young Ralph watched his parents exhaust themselves working constantly, and he learned something important early in life: that hard work alone wouldn't lift you out of poverty. You needed brains, strategy, and the determination to never stop pushing forward no matter how many obstacles blocked your path. School became Ralph's ticket out of village life and farm work. He started at Culinary Roman Catholic school where his teachers immediately noticed this kid absorbed information like a sponge soaking up water, and could debate and argue circles around students much older than him. When he moved to St. Vincent Boys Grammar School, everyone recognized that Ralph Gonsalves was heading somewhere far beyond the small world of village life, though nobody could imagine just how far he would go or how many people's lives he would eventually touch. Ralph earned his spot at the University of the West Indies in Jamaica, and when he got there, he didn't just attend classes and pass tests. He absolutely dominated every single aspect of campus life with an intensity that almost seemed obsessive. In 1969, the university named him Student of the Year, which sounds like just a nice trophy until you understand what that actually meant at UWI during the revolutionary 1960 seconds, when Caribbean students were reimagining their entire world after centuries of being controlled by European colonial powers. Ralph won championship after championship in debating competitions, not just defeating opponents, but completely destroying their arguments with razor-sharp logic combined with passionate speaking that left audiences absolutely stunned. He became president of the Guild of Undergraduates, representing thousands of students across the entire campus, but somehow he still found time to play cricket, perform as a tenor pan player in the university steel band, making music that echoed through Kingston streets, write articles for the student newspaper that challenged authority and questioned everything, and represent UWI at the American Debating Championships, where this young man from a tiny Caribbean island showed Americans that intelligence and great speaking skills weren't owned exclusively by their fancy Ivy League schools. The 1960 seconds and 1970 seconds weren't just about fashion and music in the Caribbean. They were about revolution, independence, and young people believing they could completely rebuild society from the ground up and create something entirely new. Ralph studied economics and government, not as boring academic subjects but as weapons to understand and eventually overthrow the systems keeping Caribbean people poor and dependent on their former colonial masters who had controlled them for centuries. He earned his bachelor's degree in economics, then pushed forward for a master's degree in government in 1971. Always hungry for more knowledge, more tools, more weapons for the intellectual battles that lay ahead. Then he traveled to England, to the University of Manchester, for his PhD in government. But he didn't just stay locked in some dusty library reading old books. He spent a whole year in Uganda at Makerere University researching trade unions and how workers organize, seeing with his own eyes how African nations were fighting with the same post-colonial challenges facing the Caribbean. By 1974, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves had completed his doctorate degree, and in 1981, he qualified as a lawyer at Gray's Inn in London, one of the most respected and prestigious legal institutions in the entire world. This farm boy from Culinary now had multiple university degrees, legal training, international experience, and a burning desire to completely reshape his homeland according to revolutionary, socialist principles that would lift up poor people and break the chains of economic dependency on rich countries. Then everything exploded in the Caribbean in a way nobody expected. On March 13, 1979, a man named Maurice Bishop led a bloodless coup in Grenada, overthrowing the government without firing shots and establishing the People's Revolutionary Government that promised to transform that tiny island into a shining example of Caribbean socialism. Ralph Gonsalves wasn't watching from the sidelines or reading about it in newspapers. He was right there as one of Maurice Bishop's advisors, helping create policies and strategies for this revolutionary experiment that captured the imagination of young people across the entire Caribbean region. On April 6, 1979, just weeks after the Grenada Revolution happened, Ralph stood in St. Vincent and declared that what happened in Grenada had greatly raised the consciousness of the masses in the whole Caribbean, basically saying that people across the region were waking up and realizing they didn't have to accept poverty and inequality as their permanent condition for the rest of their lives. Ralph was leading a group called ULIMO and later helped start the United People's Movement, pushing extreme left-wing politics and calling for a socialist approach to save St. Vincent's economy, which he said in February 1979 was poised at the edge of bankruptcy and desperately needed revolutionary transformation immediately. But nature has a way of interrupting even the grandest political plans that humans make. On April 13, 1979, Mount Soufriere volcano erupted in St. Vincent with such tremendous force that over 14,000 people had to evacuate their homes immediately, running away from lava and ash that threatened to bury entire villages under molten rock and burning debris. The damage cost nearly 14 million Eastern Caribbean dollars, an absolutely massive amount for a small island economy already struggling to survive economically. And suddenly Ralph and other politicians had to deal with immediate disaster relief and helping people find shelter and food instead of long-term revolutionary planning and political theory. Then on October 27, 1979, St. Vincent and the Grenadines finally gained full independence from Britain after centuries of colonial rule. But the celebration was complicated because Ralph's United People's Movement supported independence while simultaneously opposing the new constitution, calling it inadequate and too friendly to foreign business interests. The UP became what observers called a virtual protege of Maurice Bishop's revolutionary government in Grenada, ideologically aligned and strategically coordinated, dreaming of a Caribbean where former colonies would chart their own socialist path completely free from American and British interference and control. Reality crashed those revolutionary dreams incredibly hard. The United People's Movement struggled badly to win votes because most Vincentians, while sympathetic to calls for economic justice and helping poor people, weren't ready to embrace full-blown socialism and revolution that might turn their lives upside down. The revolutionary message that worked in Grenada during a sudden coup didn't translate to winning democratic elections in St. Vincent, where people wanted change and improvement but preferred gradual reform over radical transformation that felt dangerous and unpredictable. Then came October 19, 1983, when the United States invaded Grenada after internal conflicts within Bishop's government spiraled into violence and chaos, and Bishop himself was executed by hardline revolutionaries within his own movement who thought he wasn't revolutionary enough. American troops crushed the revolutionary government completely, and just like that, the Caribbean's brief revolutionary moment ended in blood and foreign invasion and shattered dreams. Ralph could have given up right then and there like so many other leftist leaders who saw their dreams destroyed and their comrades killed or thrown in prison. But something deep inside him absolutely refused to quit or surrender. Instead, Ralph transformed himself in a way that very few politicians ever managed successfully in their entire careers. The revolutionary Marxist became a democratic socialist willing to work within the system. The firebrand calling for immediate, radical change became a patient reformer willing to compromise and wait. He didn't abandon his core beliefs about economic justice and standing up to powerful nations that pushed smaller countries around. But he learned that winning power democratically required building coalitions, making compromises, and speaking to people's immediate concerns about jobs and schools and hospitals rather than abstract revolutionary theory that sounded good in university classrooms but confused regular people. Ralph practiced law to pay his bills and support his family, wrote books to share his ideas with the world, taught as a lecturer at the University of the West Indies and as a visiting professor at Queen's College at the City University of New York, passing his knowledge to younger generations while patiently waiting for his political moment to finally arrive. His personal life moved forward through marriages and children even as his political career seemed stuck and stalled. His first marriage gave him 2 sons, Camillo born in 1972 in Philadelphia and Adam, but that marriage eventually ended in divorce. Later he married Alois Harris, a woman from Trinidad with Dominican roots who studied English and French at the University of the West Indies and fashion design at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, bringing her own accomplishments and intelligence to match Ralph's formidable resume and credentials. Together they had 3 more children, a son named Storm and 2 daughters called Isis and Solisle. Ralph and Alois are both practicing Roman Catholics, attending Mass regularly and raising their children in the Catholic faith despite Ralph's leftist politics that sometimes put him at odds with the church's conservative positions. The family recently faced controversy when news broke that Alois and 2 of their children acquired properties from Trinidad's Housing Development Corporation, with critics loudly accusing Ralph of using political connections for personal benefit. Ralph's response was pure defiance. He said dirty water can't tarnish gold, insisting his family did absolutely nothing wrong and followed all proper procedures perfectly. But the most significant family development was definitely political and raised serious questions about power and dynasties. Camillo, Ralph's eldest son born during those revolutionary days in Philadelphia, followed his father directly into politics after building his own impressive career as a journalist in Philadelphia and then as a corporate litigation attorney in Washington, D.C. handling complex legal cases. In 2013, Camillo made the absolutely dramatic decision to renounce his United States citizenship so he could become a senator in St. Vincent's Parliament, giving up the passport of the world's most powerful nation to serve in a tiny Caribbean country of just over 100,000 people total. Ralph appointed him Minister of Foreign Affairs, putting him in charge of all the country's relationships with other nations. And then in November 2017, made a move that sparked enormous controversy. He handed over the finance ministry to Camillo, who was only 45 years old at the time. Ralph had controlled that incredibly powerful position since 2001, managing every single dollar of government spending for 16 straight years, and now he was giving it to his son, creating what critics angrily called a political dynasty where one family concentrated way too much power and control. Supporters pointed to Camillo's qualifications with degrees from Temple University, George Washington University Law School, and New York University, arguing he earned the position through merit and education, not just family connections. Today, Camillo Gonsalves serves as Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Information Technology, elected twice to represent the East St. George constituency, and clearly being prepared as his father's eventual successor. Ralph's political breakthrough finally came in 1994 when 2 opposition parties merged together to form the Unity Labour Party, a social democratic party that could actually win elections by appealing to a much broader coalition of voters than the revolutionary UP ever managed to attract. Ralph became deputy leader, learning the detailed mechanics of party organization and electoral strategy. In 1998, after party leader Vincent resigned, Ralph took over as leader of the UP, and from December 1999 to January 2001, he served as leader of the opposition, building the party machine and preparing for his shot at real power. On March 28, 2001, everything Ralph had worked for over 3 long decades finally came together when he led the Unity Labour Party to victory in the general elections. At age 54, the former revolutionary who once advised Maurice Bishop became Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, also taking on the finance minister role to control the nation's economic policy directly. What happened next absolutely defies political gravity in an era where voters usually throw leaders out after just 1 or 2 terms. Ralph won in 2001, and then kept winning again and again. He won again in 2005 comfortably. In 2010, he narrowly survived with only 11% of the popular vote, so close that everyone thought his time was finally up. But he proved everyone wrong and won again in 2015, and then achieved an absolutely unprecedented 5th consecutive victory in 2020, making him the longest continuously serving Prime Minister since St. Vincent's independence in 1979. When Samoan Prime Minister Tulipa Sela Malieleguai lost power in 2021, Ralph Gonsalves became the longest-serving democratically elected state leader in the entire world, outlasting everyone else through a combination of political skill, economic management, and genuine connection with voters who kept believing he was their best option. However, That 2020 victory came with a massive problem that his opponents will never let him forget. For the first time ever, the Unity Labour Party won the parliamentary seats but actually lost the popular vote, meaning more Vincentians voted against him than for him, but the way voting districts are drawn meant Ralph kept power anyway. This fueled explosive debates about whether the system was deliberately rigged to keep Ralph in power regardless of what voters actually wanted. Ralph tried twice to fundamentally reshape St. Vincent's relationship with Britain. In 2009, he led a referendum campaign to abolish the constitutional monarchy, which would mean replacing Queen Elizabeth II as head of state with a president chosen by Vincentians themselves, finally completing the independence process that started in 1979. The Vincentian people rejected his plan with 55.64% voting no, preferring to keep their symbolic connection to the British crown even though it had no real power over their lives. Ralph didn't accept defeat quietly, he proposed another referendum in 2022 to replace the monarchy and has voiced very strong support for renaming colonial-era places in the country, arguing that celebrating British admirals and governors makes absolutely no sense for a supposedly independent nation. The debate continues with Ralph pushing decolonization and many Vincentians resisting change to familiar traditions. August 5, 2021, brought shocking violence that nobody expected. Ralph Gonsalves was near the parliament entrance when protesters opposing mandatory COVID-19 vaccination threw something that hit the 74-year-old prime minister directly in the head, causing visible injuries that required immediate hospital treatment. Trade unions representing nurses, police officers, and other workers had organized the protest because the country was bitterly divided over vaccine mandates, with Ralph's government pushing aggressive vaccination policies, while many citizens viewed this as government overreach violating personal freedom. Most Vincentians were absolutely horrified that protesters had physically attacked their prime minister, crossing a dangerous line that threatened to normalize political violence in a small nation where everyone basically knows everyone else. Ralph recovered completely, but the incident revealed deep tensions in Vincentian society where even a beloved leader nicknamed Comrade Ralph wasn't immune to anger boiling over into violence. Ralph's influence extends far beyond his small island nation's shores. From July to December 2020, he chaired CARICOM, the 15-member Caribbean trade bloc, using that platform to advocate loudly for regional interests on the world stage. He's been a fierce defender of sovereignty for small nations everywhere, consistently opposing U.S. sanctions on countries like Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, arguing that powerful nations have no right to economically strangle smaller countries just because they disagree with their political systems. In 2022, Nicaragua's President Daniel Ortega decorated Ralph with the Order of Cesar Augusto Sandino, calling him a tireless anti-imperialist fighter. Recognition that Ralph wears proudly even though it infuriates critics who view Ortega as an authoritarian dictator. Ralph helped mediate the 2023 Guyana-Venezuela crisis when Venezuela threatened to seize Guyanese territory, organizing a crucial meeting between Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro and Guyanese President Irfan Ali to prevent the situation from exploding into actual military conflict. In May 2023, he attended King Charles III's coronation at Westminster Abbey in London, which seemed contradictory since he wants to abolish the monarchy in his own country. But Ralph understands that politics requires maintaining relationships even with institutions you oppose. What truly separates Ralph from typical politicians is his intellectual depth demonstrated through numerous published books including The Spectre of Imperialism in 1976, The Non-Capitalist Path of Development in 1981, History and the Future in 1994, and The Case for Caribbean Reparatory Justice in 2014. He practices law before the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, continuing complex legal work even while serving as Prime Minister full-time, and writes constantly about how small nations can survive and thrive despite being surrounded by much more powerful countries. He's 79 years old, having celebrated his birthday on August 8, 2025. Ralph was recently selected as the Unity Labour Party's candidate to contest the North Central Windward constituency in elections expected before February 2026. His son Camilo told supporters that despite his age, the Prime Minister still has more energy than the rest of the party members combined, defending his father against critics who say 79 is too old to lead effectively. The OLP seeks a sixth consecutive term, which would shatter every record and cement Ralph's status forever as the most successful politician in his nation's entire history. Comment below which part shocked you most. Was it going from farm village to five-time prime minister, or still running strong at 79? Retriclaude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. Sonnet 4.5